Hello everybody, this is Dan with Screaming Donkey Woodwork, and today I'm going to try to make some really super cool legs for this Cthulhu table that I made a few months back. I asked AI to make me a template, and seriously, this was the best I could come up with.
Bruh.
So I decided to take matters into my own hands. I hope you're ready to get weird with wood. As per usual, I had no idea how I was going to do this. I just knew how I wanted it to look when I finished.
Yeah, that'll work.
I have no idea where I fall within the spectrum of woodworkers. I do know that some creators need a whole lot of plans to get things done, and some just kind of wing it the whole way through. I definitely know I'm one where I have the whole plan in my head like pretty quick when I start working with something, but I know that the first time I'm going to build it is kind of a throwaway. I build it because I'm going to learn a new technique with it or learn where I messed up. So the next time that I build it, I can build it better. Trust me when I say I'm not going to do any of this right. But the next time I do it, I will do it better. First and foremost, I don't have a ton of experience with wood glue, and I don't own a ton of clamps yet. And I keep acquiring more, but I don't feel like I will ever have enough. So that doesn't mean I don't know how to glue anything up, because when it comes to slabs, I can glue slabs up left and right. You know, to me, that's easy peasy. My woodworking journey was kind of backward. I started with the biggest things and then worked my way down to smaller things. I think everyone's advice typically is, if like you're going to get into woodwork, start with something small. Well, I have the opposite opinion, because I have the opposite journey. I say start with a coffee table, and then you know if you're going to get into it or not. And for these tables, I started with a dining table. My first finished woodwork project was a set of built-in cabinets. So if you're watching this, I'm not going to talk through how I glued everything up and tell you how to do it, because I did a lot of it wrong. I mean, I even own one of those fancy glue rollers, and I used my finger to spread the glue. I do, however, know how to use a miter saw. Or until this week, at least I thought I did, because I saw a creator pulling their miter saw through the wood, like toward them to make the cut, as opposed to pushing it through. I was always taught to push it through. So does somebody know something that I don't know? Maybe they just were taught different, or maybe it's more stable, or the cut's cleaner or something. But if you know, let me know in the comments. So here I did a bunch of measuring, and really the trick was I wanted to end up with the pieces that were pretty close to identical, and really they didn't have to be all that perfect, because in the end I was going to carve the hell out of them anyway, so they just really had to be kind of similar to each other. And I was really tired of sucking with the domino joiner. Everybody says, it's the easy button. Finished joinery is easier for me than using my domino properly. And really the only reason why is I just don't have a ton of experience with it. I've only used it twice so far, so this third time I was determined I was going to make a ton of domino joints, and I was going to figure out why I sucked at it. I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be embarrassed about this, but I'm going to save the energy of embarrassment and just tell you what I was doing wrong and how I figured out how to do it better. Okay, so you see that tape there? That's my attempt to fix the problem. That's the first attempt I made. And what was happening was I would do the domino on one side, flip it over to the other, and I would kind of shift the position a little bit. So then the two dominoes weren't lining up exactly with each other. So I used this tape, and I figured, okay, this will keep it. But the problem is the tape has a little bit too much give in it, so the two pieces of wood can slide against each other. So everything I've used the domino joiner on, short of a couple of slabs, is for this purpose. Slabs were easy. They went together no problem. But anytime I did something that was kind of square and I had to go on opposite sides of it, no matter how perfectly flush they were, and you saw they were perfectly flush because I ran them through the same thicknesser, also known as a planer for those of you in the United States. So I'm just figuring I just am terrible. I shouldn't be a woodworker. I should give this all up right now, because I'm not consistently getting that satisfying click of cutting the perfect domino holes into each side of the wood. They are always just slightly off. So I'll show you all the screw ups and then tell you how I got it right. So if you ever find yourself in a position doing a big chunky piece of wood like this and have to put a domino on each side of it, just put in one domino first. Put a domino in that joint and use that as a guide to go back and scribe your line on the other side. When you go back to scribe, you'll also be able to see if your edges align perfectly. So if there was, say, a height adjustment difference between the wood when I put the domino in there on the other side, I can make the adjustment on my fence to compensate for that so I could perfectly align up the dominoes. I mean, just look at this bullshit. I got to wiggle them to get them started one into the other. That means they're misaligned. Now, I'm not sure if there is actually a problem with my domino joiner or what, but my dominoes, if I slide that wood just a little tiny bit, my dominoes will be longer than what they need to be because they seriously bottom out on both sides, which results in a lack of clamping pressure because the domino is taking all the pressure from the clamp. Oh, it's also entirely possible I just got a bad batch of dominoes. Because I tested this out, I even cut some wood open afterward, and literally my dominoes are always all the way to the bottom of the pocket cut by the domino joiner. So I've taken to cutting my pockets a little bit deeper for the domino that I need. Except, and this is a big except, when I'm using the maximum size domino, because I don't have that option to cut a little bit deeper. So the only thing that I could do at that point is to sand a little bit off the end of each domino. In any case, I'm going to start an I Suck at the Domino Joiner support line, and I'll be able to share anything that I learned to make myself slightly better. And I support anybody who wants to make fun of me for not knowing how to use a domino jointer. Yes, I bought a $1,200 tool and I suck at it. Just know that if you do, we're pretty sure you're the same type of person that would make fun of the fat guy at the gym.
Hey, watch it, fatty.
I'm in no way coming on here trying to claim that I'm an expert and trying to teach you how to do things the right way, but I am sharing the journey that I go through to figure things out and make some cool stuff. At the same time, I do have to acknowledge that there are cases where I probably should know better, but that's what the comment section is for. So if you see something that I could be doing better, let me know. And realistically, if you think I suck, just let me know that too. I mean, how else would I know that so many people are so concerned with my feet if I didn't have those comments? I'm always curious with those people what they think is going to happen to my feet. Like I'm going to drop a live saw on my foot. I think that probably would be the worst case scenario, right? I mean, here if I dropped the running domino joiner on my foot, the blade would retract before it hit the ground. So, all right, maybe in the perfect scenario, it could hit bit down and hit hard enough to where the fence retracts and then punch a hole in my foot. Then since it's like a routing bit, it could grab a hold of the skin and like climb its way up my neck and then hit me in the jugular. I seriously even Googled this for woodworker injuries, looking for foot injuries, and I couldn't find anything except for some anecdotal stories, and most of them had to do with people who are working out on job sites. I think it's kind of like the fractal burning myth that if you fractal burn, you're going to die. And somewhere between 20 and 30 people have unalived themselves while fractal burning. And in a country of 300 plus million people, if I have 100 people on my live, inevitably one of them is friends with one of the people that unalived themselves. They feel justified in telling this lie because it's helping me to be safer. Would wearing steel toe shoes in my shop be safer? Yes. And will I ultimately end up wearing steel toe shoes in my shop because I'm becoming an example? Yes. As a matter of fact, when we hit 100,000 subscribers, I will be in steel toes from that point on. But just realize the chances of me injuring my piggies is pretty low. Because with your logic, nobody should do anything that ever carries any inherent risk. And by your logic, nobody should ever use a table saw. All right, that's enough of my don't make fun of my feet rant. I'm going to end up with a bunch of my brother dropped a saw on his foot stories in my comments. So let's get back to the woodwork at hand. After I got everything to fit pretty decently, I started gluing everything up and immediately realized there was no good way to clamp this all together. I guess there kind of was. I could have cut up some MDF triangles and glued them on there and then clamped together like that, but I just really didn't have a whole lot of faith in that, so I wanted to go ahead and use the screws to provide the clamping pressure that I needed. I knew the joints were far from perfect, and I was going to end up carving it up anyway and probably using a little bit of filler or some CA glue or some epoxy so I wasn't super concerned with there being a couple of screw holes in it. On top of that, Goodfella sent me some product, and they were kind of pressing me to try it out, so I knew this was going to be a great project for it because you wouldn't really be able to see these holes with where they're buried anyway. I let the glue cure for 24 hours, and I know that's really important to do, and I'm typically pretty good at doing it, but earlier in this project, I didn't let it cure for 24 hours and started to work with it. And I think probably most woodworkers make this mistake at some point. And it's probably okay to do at some points as long as you're not putting any stress on the new joint. But in my case, I was whacking it with a mallet. So, it did not work very well. Another mistake that I made that was kind of hard to see is I over-tightened some of the screws when I was gluing it together, which created too much clamping pressure and squeezed out too much glue, which made for a really weak joint where just the dominoes were holding it together. So I'm going to say this, and you probably hear it all the time from other woodworkers, but, just snug enough to close the gap and squeeze out some glue. I can say this, that panel glue-ups are much, much easier. And if I want to get better at it, I got to do more of it, so there ain't nothing to it but to do it. I think like most of us, I watch a lot of Jonathan Katz-Moses videos, and in theory, I know what to do, but practice is a whole nother thing. So here I'm carving out the leg and using a series of different cut saw bits. Now here I have kind of a tool complaint. I have really big hands, and this electric die grinder fits in it kind of perfect. And it's not really got a ton of torque, so it's not the most dangerous of tools. And because it fits my hand properly, I feel pretty secure with it. The angle grinder, on the other hand, I don't think that fits anyone's hand properly. I have some big mitts, and I can't count on two hands how many times the angle grinder has slipped from my right hand there, and I have retried to grab it, and I have pulled the trigger. So not only does it not fit comfortably in my right hand, but the trigger is a function of grabbing the tool. I do feel, however, though, that the trigger is safer than the thumb switch on the back that locks it into the running position that some of the other angle grinders have. So if someone makes a angle grinder with a better ergonomic hand fit, please let me know in the comments. I do really like the DeWalt compared to the Ryobi that I had before. And unlike the gluing, this is something I have a whole lot of practice with. Not really carving up octopus legs, but using the cut saw disc on a angle grinder. I make a lot of epoxy wood slab tables, and I just cannot stand to have a hard line going into the epoxy. So over time, I've gotten pretty good at faking live edges and faking rot using the cut saw disc. So I know the cut saw disc is made for the angle grinder, but I don't believe that the angle grinder is as ergonomic as it could be for using it the way that I use it. I would love to have an angle grinder with a built-in handle on the back. I know you can get the one on the back that replaces the one on the side, but I would want both. The one on the side and then one on the back also, and then a trigger point on that, if that makes sense. And then a trigger that was something different than just grabbing the tool, but still easy on your hand. And while we're designing tools, let's go ahead and make a better dust shroud for them too. So a couple of the creators that I follow have been talking about how they do or don't see the image in their head of what it's going to turn out like in the end. And I'm one who kind of doesn't. I kind of do, but kind of don't. If you think of the image in your head as a digital image, I don't see that. I don't close my eyes and see what the wood is going to look like before I start carving on it. But there is an analog reference in my head, and I know what I have to do and when I have achieved it. And one of the creators, Four Eyes, has aphantasia. He can't see anything in his head, so he makes plans for everything. And a lot of the other creators can see everything, and they make plans for nothing. So I think I fall in the aphantasia group because I can't see the image in my head. But again, it's really weird because all of the information is there. So I often will say something to the effect of, this isn't lining up with the image in my head, but that's not exactly what is happening. I do the same thing with inner monologue, and maybe if I explain that, it'll be better. So I was explaining to my wife that I don't hear my voice in my head. And rightly so, she equated that with having no inner monologue because, very often I have foot and mouth syndrome. But I think I have an inner monologue. It's just not in the form of a voice, because I can play out a conversation that I'm going to have with someone. I just don't hear it. I can think the word spaghetti and maybe even mouth it in the back of my throat at the same time, but I think that's more of what it is. that conversation is a memory of muscle memory. My brain's just running through all the things that would have to happen to have this conversation so I can practice the conversation first in my head. So what I'm trying to create isn't necessarily an image, but all the data for that image is there. 100% I'm atypical neural, I know this. I had a very difficult time with social convention until I got into my 30s. And hearing all of these other people talk about how they think of things and can see things in their head or can't see things in their head, brings back to me a question that I always asked when I was a kid. And the question was, how do we all know that we're seeing the colors the same? But the underlying question there was, why do we assume that we are all processing data the same? All of the evidence is there that we don't at all. But to relate to each other, we come up with common terminology to express feelings and thoughts among ourselves. I think most of us are driven to fit in, to seem innately normal. But the older I get, the more I realize how weird and different we are from each other. How two similar people with similar backgrounds may have completely different motivational sets and completely different ideals. So in any case, the tentacles came out like they looked in my head. This is a new favorite tool of mine. It's a flap sander that goes on your drill. Industrial-sized versions of these are used to sand parts that are oddly shaped. So it's a pretty perfect tool for sanding these tentacles. I did, however, have to go in all four directions with them, and I made sure that the last sand I went in the direction of the grain with the tentacles. So in my head I had this question, do I sand it all smooth, or do I leave some of the tool marks in to add some texture to the tentacles? So what I settled on is if it looked like a tool mark, I would sand it out. If it looked like a scratch or a gouge, I would leave it. There were some spots in my grind away on the tentacles that made it look like the Damascus steel, so I thought that was super cool. And when I would sand those areas completely smooth, they just ended up looking like concentric rings. All right, another tool gripe while we're here. Do not buy this 3M sander. I've had 2 of them now, and I'm about to go to my 3rd. Apparently, there's a problem with the heat sink where it is not dissipating enough heat from the motherboard on it, and the processor burns up on it. I can't vouch to the accuracy of what I just said, but I can say I've had 2 of them, and both of them stopped working after a little bit of continuous use. And it's really too bad, too, because other than that, this is an awesome sander. I'm an electrical engineer, so when I get the next one as the replacement, I'm going to fix it before I start using it. And I'm not saying you have to be an electrical engineer to fix it, but I'm just saying that in terms of I have some experience replacing heat sinks. So here's the good fillet. It came in the mail and then sat on my shelf for about 3 months, but I think it was a little dry when it came, but I think they actually ship it like that. So the great thing about this good fillet is you mix it with a little bit of water and you can reconstitute it. You know, I have big sausage fingers and I'm not very agile, so bear with this nice smearing technique that I do here. So my joint cracks here weren't anything too bad, but they were big enough to where I probably wanted to put some fillet in there. And I believe this leg was the leg that led me to do all the testing with my dominoes. Because it didn't make any sense that gap wasn't closed all the way. It's been more than a month since I actually did this, so it's a little bit hard to remember back to it. But I'm pretty sure that's the joint that ended up falling apart. As for the good fillet, it worked pretty great. I used the walnut color, and you really couldn't even tell that it was there when we were done with it. See, that's a lie. I could. Any blemish that you end up left with as a woodworker, I mean, you just want to scrutinize it and make it perfect, and you sit there and we'll consider ways of making it better. But it's art, right? So at a certain point, you'd have to say the painting is done. It looked good, and I don't think anyone should be ashamed of using wood filler, but a lot of the time I am. Those are the things that drive you to get a little bit better each time that you do it. One of the biggest reasons it took me so long to get into finished woodwork in my life is because I was a perfectionist. And I could not stand anything not being perfect. I had to get over that. You have to strive for improvements in woodwork as opposed to perfection in woodwork. Because if you don't, you'll just quit, because without certain skill sets, you're just not going to get certain things perfect. And I would suggest writing a list down of the things that you want to be able to do and do better. If you're one of those I have to have goals to accomplish type people, because then you'll pretty quickly end up with a checklist of things that you improve on. Like one of my favorite stories along those lines is the jigsaw. And I was absolutely horrible with it. I didn't understand that you had to kind of twist it from the back. And it requires some muscle memory buildup and some experience cutting different thicknesses. But once you get it and you kind of understand it, it makes it look easy. And now it is easy, but it took time to get there. And I think it's easy to forget that it took time to get there, because you could tell that by the comments of some of the more experienced woodworkers being like, "You're doing that all wrong." I can make a plunge cut with a jigsaw. I saw Stumpy Nubs do it, and I'm like, I am going to learn that technique, because it's such a pain in the butt to have to go back and grab a drill bit anytime you want to put the jigsaw back in. But did I get it right the first time? Hell no. Not even probably the 10th time I didn't get it right. So don't watch these videos and see the parts that I'm awesome at and think like, oh my God, I suck. I'm so terrible at this. I mean, that's how I feel. So maybe I should stop beating myself up. That's it. Yeah. We should all stop beating ourselves up. And if you want to go on and make a tutorial on something that you just learned and you're not the greatest at it, go do it, because see one, do one, teach one is the greatest way to learn something. You never learn something better than when you have to teach it to others. As for the haters, embrace your haters. They watch the whole video to make fun of you so they can really drive your views. And then make comments back to them when they make hater comments to try to encourage them to say more, because that drives up your engagement. Don't block them. One of my most loyal viewers used to just get on my videos to tell me how much he hated my voice. I may have implied back to him that my voice was soothing to his wife in the throes of passion, but I didn't block him. As a matter of fact, there's only one real reason I will block someone, and that's victim mentality. Right now, those people can be kind of dangerous. I grew up in circumstances that were terrible. I've had a rough life, but I've never been a victim. The most blocking that I ever did on my channel was when I did a puzzle piece table video, and some people were on there in support of using it for Autism Speaks, and some people were on there calling Autism Speaks a hate group. Both of my boys are autistic, and they're not victims. But a group of those people started sharing the video and talking about how bad it was and how terrible it was, so I just ended up blocking the whole group. And not that I have any dog in the fight on either side of it. We never really dealt with Autism Speaks. I don't really know the actual history behind it, so I didn't really care. And when I talked to my boys about it, they didn't care either. As a matter of fact, my oldest was the one who explained to me that those type of people just run with it, and I probably should ban them. That the autism or the autism of their children define them, and that they cannot see around to the other people's way of thinking. Which brings us full circle to how different people process the data in different ways. So for my processing, I just don't want to deal with people who process their information to make themselves a victim. We honestly need to celebrate more of those people who have terrible things happen to them, yet they pick up the banner and keep marching on. So I was happy with the legs, but when they went on the tabletop, they looked awful. And it didn't take me but a couple seconds to realize it was because the legs were too chunky up top. So I worked pretty hard on figuring out the dimensions on what to cut everything to get the tabletop the height that I wanted it to be. So I was a little disappointed that I was going to have to take a couple inches off it, but I guess if I really wanted to, I could fix that with some adjustable feet. That probably was my only real option other than just to rage quit. Not that I'm above that, because sometimes it's deeply satisfying just to throw away the thing that is causing you so much pain. But next time this happens, I promise at least I will make a fake rage quit segment of the video. Unless I really screw something up, and then you'll get to see like the real rage quit and the dumpster throw. But from what I can tell with epoxy, if you have an epoxy thing go bad, it's not really a rage quit. It's more of a get this thing out of the shop before it burns the shop down quit. Knock on wobbly particle board on a flimsy steel table. But I'm approaching 100 epoxy projects, and I have yet to have to run a project out of the shop because it started smoking. So this cut was super nerve-wracking because initially I did not think that the saw would make it all the way through it. So it was like a 4-inch cut across 12 inches. It was about a 4-inch cut across 12 inches, and I definitely have screwed up cuts on the miter saw before where things have shot across the room. Looking at it here, it doesn't actually look too sketchy, but in the moment, I did have a healthy dose of fear going on while I was cutting this. I would have felt okay with it if the part of the tentacle that was in the saw slot was actually up against the fence. But since it was off, that was telling my brain, like, this is not right. I know I had it secured pretty well. Looking at it here, it was probably a lot safer than what I was feeling at the moment, but scary. I did have a good flat reference edge for it, so it did come out all right. See, this looks much better. I've decided I'm going to put this in my office until I sell it, so at the moment that you see this, you can buy it for me. I'm asking $3,000 for it. You can find the links in my profile and hit me up if you want it. I'm really hoping, though, that nobody buys it. It's really super cool. Oh, wow, you made it to the end. What does that say about your life? If you made it this far, you might as well give me a follow because it's not getting any better. Get weird with wood. If you watched all this, might as well watch a couple more. What else are you doing? Shopping tools on Amazon, playing Sudoku, watching the March Madness, talking to your kids, ignoring your wife, hiding in the bathroom, on an all-male camping trip, snuggling your tools.